Well, good morning, everyone. So nice to see all of your faces. Many familiar faces, some unfamiliar faces. I'm zooming in here from suburban New Jersey and say good morning to you wherever you happen to be. It's only April, but this week it seemed that the heat of summer was upon us. We have a little bit of a cold front come through, so it's a little cooler today. But boy, I've never experienced 90-degree weather in early April before. So I've been fighting off a viral infection, and I went to bed early on Tuesday evening. Spent the night alternating between sweating and shivering. On Wednesday morning, we took our dog Maisie for a walk. It felt like my legs were filled with lead. I came home and spent most of the day in bed sleeping. And it's been going on like this through today, pretty much. On Friday, I started feeling a little better, but I'm still lightheaded and weak and kind of achy. And while I'm not prone to magical thinking, I sometimes think that I get sick when I need to. I don't by any means believe that this is true for all sicknesses, but it may sometimes be true. I can be very driven to the point where I'm not taking care of myself or the people around me. And so getting sick is a reset. On Wednesday, I found myself sitting at the table in the family room, watching the branches of the old pine tree be tossed by the wind. And Maisie was sleeping on the floor beside me. Things were just as they were. There was nothing to do and no one to do it. I don't let myself sit still often enough, and I think I needed a reset. So I've appreciated this 96-hour period of sickness, which is still going on, with nothing to do except to allow myself to get better and feed the dog and just take care of basic things. I don't particularly like the chills or the night sweats, but they do have the effect of bringing me right back to this moment. They remind me that there's a time and a place for doing, and there's also a time and a place for just being. Sitting in the family room watching the wind toss the branches of the old pine, I was reminded of Enkyo Roshi's Instagram photos around New York City. A photo of the grain on an old piece of wood, or of a sunset, or of the buds on a tree in winter. Just noticing the world that we are not separate from. In the movie Lady Bird, Sister Sarah Joan asks if attention and love are perhaps the same thing. I think they are. So yesterday, finally, after a visit to the doctor, yielded nothing. A negative COVID test, negative flu test, negative strep throat test. I came home and I realized what I think is going on. I have Lyme's disease. After visiting urgent care, I came home and took a shower and found a tick on my body that had been there for a couple of days. It was dead. And so mystery solved. Now I just need to get back to the doctor and start treatment. But it's completely consistent with everything I've ever heard about Lyme's disease. Probably if I had talked to Bokushu, he would have diagnosed this on Tuesday, because Bokushu is deadly afraid of ticks. And I've lived in this area for 40 years and have never once had Lyme's disease. But it feels a lot like a flu, and it feels a lot like probably mild COVID, and you have aches and pains for no reason. So that's what's been going on with me. Recently, I've been reading the Platform Sutra. The platform in the title is the teaching platform in a Zendo. And the sutra consists of the teachings of the sixth patriarch, Huineng. The The sutra was written around 850 CE, and it has a very different character from early Mahayana sutras, like the Lotus Sutra or the Flower Ornament Sutra, which are in their way very, very beautiful, but sometimes can be very, very kind of difficult to penetrate, difficult to sort of get into the jargon and the language and the extreme exaggeration of those very, very early sutras. The language of the Platform Sutra is very down to earth. And if you read it, you will recognize all of its teachings in the Zen that we practice today. The first part of the Platform Sutra will be familiar to most of you. It's Huineng's story, the story about how he came to study with the fifth patriarch and came to be his successor. Huineng was born to a poor family in southern China. His father died when he was very young, which left his mother destitute. Huineng never received any formal education, so he was illiterate. And one day while he was selling firewood in the market, Huineng heard someone reciting the Diamond Sutra. And somehow, just hearing this sutra, his mind felt clear and bright. And he asked the person chanting where he could learn about it. And that person said that he had gotten it from Hongren, who headed a temple of over 1,000 monks in northern China. So Huineng resolved right then and there that he would go and visit that temple and learn from Hongren. And he packed his belongings and he said goodbye to his poor mother and set out for the temple. When he arrived, the patriarch asked Huineng where he was from and what he hoped to accomplish. And Huineng said he was from the south and that he came to pay his respects and that he only wanted to become a Buddha. That was all he wanted. And as the story goes, Hongren asked him, how can a barbarian from the south like you become a Buddha? So in China in those days, perhaps similar to this country these days, there's attitudes of the north towards the south, which are not favorable. And the Southerns were considered to be uneducated barbarians, whereas the Northerners were more refined, more educated, more cultivated. And so how could a barbarian, an illiterate barbarian at that from the South, become a Buddha? How's that possible? And Huineng's response is interesting. He says the lives of this barbarian and the master are very different. But how can our Buddha nature be any different? And at those words, the patriarch realized that he was speaking to a person who already had a deep understanding. But he didn't say anything more in front of his attendants. He simply sent Huineng to the kitchen where he worked pounding rice. So they had to grind the rice into a meal for the gruel that they were preparing for food in the kitchen. And Huineng worked there for many, many months. And it was actually some months later that Hongren announced to all of the monks in the monastery that he wanted to choose his successor, and that candidates, people who wanted to put themselves up for this position, should write a poem illustrating their understanding and post it on the wall. And the head monk, who was a scholarly monk named Sheng Su, who had been the head monk and had been practicing for many, many years, wrote the following poem. The body is a Bodhi tree. The mind is like a standing mirror. Always try to keep it clean. Don't let it gather dust. The body is like a Bodhi tree. The mind is like a standing mirror. Always try to keep it clean. Don't let it gather dust. So this is actually pretty good. The body is the seat of our awakening. Our mind is like a mirror reflecting the world. And if we're diligent and if we purify our minds, if we sit every day and if we live upright lives, the mind will stay clear and free of defilements. So I think Shen Tzu did pretty well, actually. The fifth patriarch, once he saw the poem and read it, that evening he called Shen Tzu into his chambers. And despite his esteemed position as the head monk in the temple, and despite his many years of study, Shen Tzu was humble, and he asked if the patriarch thought that he understood what is truly important about this life. And the patriarch was very direct with him. He said, well, you definitely have some insight, but you've not yet crossed the threshold. Your teaching will prevent ordinary people from regressing, but if one with such an understanding wishes to achieve perfect enlightenment, they will never achieve it. I want you to go and think about it some more and try again. So he sent Shen Tzu back to the cushion. In the meantime, as this was happening, Huineng heard a young monk in the temple reciting Shen Tzu's verse and asked him where he heard it. And the young monk explained that the patriarch had asked anyone who wanted to demonstrate their understanding to compose a verse. And so Huineng composed the following verses. And he asked the young monk to write them down for him and post them on the wall because, as I said before, he was illiterate. He couldn't write them down himself. And so Huineng wrote, Bodhi doesn't have any trees. This mirror doesn't have a stand. Our Buddha nature is forever pure. Where do you get this dust? And then he also composed the second verse. The mind is the Bodhi tree. The body is the mirror's stand. The mind is the Bodhi tree. The body is the mirror's stand. The mirror itself is so clean, dust has no place to land. So these poems actually show a different understanding. Do you see that? The mind is the Bodhi tree. The mind is the seat of awakening. And the body is the mirror stand. It's where this great mirror wisdom resides. The mirror itself is so clean, dust has no place to land. The mirror is originally pure. There is nothing that can be defiled. This is the fundamental teaching of the Platform Sutra. We are all Buddha. If our minds are filled with delusion, we don't see it. When our minds are free of attachments, we see it. When we let go of our attachment to a separate self, the mystery is revealed. So it's often said that these two verses, Shen Tzu's and Huineng's, illustrate the sudden and gradual schools of enlightenment. Shen Tzu's verse illustrating the importance of continuous practice. We purify our minds in order to embody the clear mirror reflecting reality freely, unobscured by defilements. And this is a very important part of our teaching. We must practice. Huineng's poems, on the other hand, reflect the teaching of emptiness that's expressed in the Diamond Sutra, the sutra that actually brought him to the temple. The emptiness teachings are about reality, just as it is. Everything is the result of causes and conditions. Nothing is fixed. So I gave a short version of this talk to our Sing Sing Sangha. And one of the prisoners there asked me a question after I recited Huineng's poem and explained the meaning of emptiness. He said, "Does it mean that everything is just as it's supposed to be?" This is a student who's been practicing with us for a few months. Does it mean that everything is just as it's supposed to be? This question actually brought tears to my eyes. Everything as it is, connected, is part of the whole. There's nothing to fix or to transform or to perfect. How difficult it can be for us to see this. But my Sing Sing friend understood. This realization of our Buddha nature is one reason that this practice is transformative. Our teachers look at us and reflect Buddha back to us. Our Sangha members look at us and reflect Buddha back to us. In most aspects of our lives, we feel we have to prove ourselves and protect ourselves and project a version of ourselves that's perfect. And we've had so many ideas projected onto us by our parents and the people we grow up with and society that we lose sight of the fact that there's a living, breathing human being with all of his or her imperfections underneath the projections. And when we enter the Zendo, of course, we try to do the same thing. We try to project the perfect Zen student. But over and over, our teachers tell us, drop it. Drop the idea of how you think you should answer. Just answer from your heart. So this talk was actually inspired by the title of a silly little country song called "I Believe in You." And I will not sing this song for you. It's actually a very silly little country song by Don Williams. I actually encourage you to listen to it after. I'll send around the link if you're interested. But how powerful it is to have someone believe in you. Most of us wouldn't be here today if many people in our lives hadn't believed in us, given us a chance, nurtured us. Our parents, our significant other, a brother or a sister, our teachers. I believe in you. Our nature contains the 10,000 dharmas. That's how great it is, Huineng says. To see humans and non-humans, the good and the bad, good dharmas and bad dharmas, without rejecting them or being corrupted by them. This is to be vast like space. The capacity of the mind is great, but if you don't use it, it's small. When thought after thought, your mind is straightforward and unobstructed, you will be free. I discovered a poem by Rumi. There are probably many poems like Rumi that speak to the many dharmas and how we engage with them in our lives. And it's not a perfect match with the two poems that I read earlier, Chen Su's and Huineng's, but I might say it's their cousin. So I'll read it to you. It's called The Many Wines. God has given us a dark wine so potent that drinking it we leave the two worlds. God made Majnun love Layla so much that just her dog would cause confusion in him. There are thousands of wines that can take over our minds. Don't think all ecstasies are the same. Jesus was lost in his love for God. His donkey was drunk with barley. Every object, every being is a jar full of delight. Be a connoisseur and taste with caution. Any wine will get you high. Judge like a king and drink only the purest, not the ones adulterated with fear or some urgency about what's needed. Drink the wine that moves you. And as a camel moves when it's been untied and is just ambling about. That's Rumi. The emptiness of our nature is vast like space. It contains multitudes. This is why I believe in you. Practice diligently, for there is no place for dust to alight. Thank you.